Welcome to Discover the Difference. I'm your host, Gabe Earl, along with my sidekick here, Jamie Reed, both co-founders of C3. We got an exciting guest coming up. His name is Michael Davidson, who self-described social entrepreneur and also CEO of an organization called Alder. We're excited that you'll be able to hear his perspective on society, what's going on in the world, and also how to be a generational leader. Enjoy the episode.
Today, joining us, Michael P. Davidson, fearless leader of an amazing organization called Alder. You know, Michael, when I was going back and checking out your profile, obviously, Gabe and I know you really well through our affiliation with Alder. But I love the very first part of it, said social entrepreneur. And I think that's such a great identifier of who you are. But where's that come from? Like, how did you dream that up?
Oh, I appreciate that. I wish I could say I had a good answer for that, but I don't. I think it's just, really trying to embody the idea of being an entrepreneur, taking risks to create something of value. And then also, how do you add the layer that it's interested in the advancement of other people beyond yourself? Even though, by the way, free enterprise itself does do that. Capitalism does do that, but trying to sort of take on a largely societally interested angle. And so that was basically it. I wish I could say something a lot more interesting. I think like the ancient Greeks or Romans, I got to refresh my memory on this one, but I think the word idiot comes from some story or some meaning from the ancients that if you did not take an interest in the life beyond yourself, that you're an idiot. And so that was like the origin of that word. I wish I could say it was some like cool play off of that, which maybe I will in the future. But right now it's just, I'm an entrepreneur trying to create something that lasts, but it's also very concerned with the betterment of future generations.
When I read it, Gabe, I'm like, Michael is such a complex human being that entrepreneur by itself is not enough. You got to stick social in front of it.
Well, it is probably have a lot to do with that. I think, being too complex is certainly one thing. That's part of it. Yes.
Hey, will you just start off by giving us a soundbite on Alder, what the organization does, and how did it come to fruition?
Alder is a community of influential people in leadership roles, wildly accomplished, who are really interested in making I think their own lives and the country as a whole committed to the betterment of future generations. And so the name itself, I actually love. The role that an alder is an alder tree. The role it plays in the forest is it's called a pioneering species. So it goes first. It takes initiative. It brings renewal. It carries the ecosystem in which it operates. And its wood brings strength and renewal. It resists rot. And so we just started to think like, wow, what powerful symbolism for what is needed in society and the country today. We need more people to view themselves as, as alders play the role in the forest, that are more people see themselves playing a role in the forest of civic life and American life. So it's just a nice symbolism for what we're trying to sort of be and create in society as a whole.
Well, what was the impetus to, go from, I think it was previously GenX to Alder, and was Alder, was that your brainchild, or was that something that
we ran a very involved naming process? And it's interesting because over the however many names that were considered, there were a lot. Alder kept making it through, but was never a top choice. And then there it is. It popped out, and it was number one. And I do think it's the best in the pack. But in terms of why rebranding in general, frankly, I just got really tired of being thought of as a youth organization, and everything from and I think in general, it was a poor market signal, so to speak. I would get everything from like, oh, are you I saw this billboard for this air conditioning company called NextGen, or oh, you're the youth philanthropy group for the symphony, or which all those things are great and important, but it wasn't us. And so GenX was really designed to embody the spirit of the mission versus exclusively the makeup of the people in it. And so, so we had to make an upgraded branding direction that talks about, really directly the type of symbolism that we're trying to signal to both our community and to society as a whole. So that was the big thing, just not to be confused with being exclusively youngsters, because we have members that are all kinds of ages. And we also wanted to have a brand that we could create and really tell a story around ourselves, which, if when we were trademarking GenX, it was a pretty crowded field. As you could imagine, there's a lot of things out there called GenX, and we don't want to get confused with Pepsi or some other organization out there.
You use the phrase generational leadership. Can you give those listening some context to what that means, and then how does that block and tackle work? How do you go influencing the next generation of leaders?
I love it. So, let's step back and just zero in on leadership itself. Most of the definitions and understandings of leadership are very mechanistic and status oriented. It's like you're in a position X, people follow you, and you're able to create Y. But there's no sense of meaning attached to it. You could be a good guy or a bad guy and be considered a leader. And so at a time in American life, or actually I think worldwide, where instant gratification runs rampant, short-term itis runs rampant, it's a big concern that we don't think about what we're passing on to future generations. And one of the things that we need to pass on are values, our knowledge. And we as a civilization don't do this at all anymore. And so we think that that's paramount, is that a true leader is really living a legacy rather than waiting to leave one. And they're doing it for the betterment of those who come beyond you or past you. And so it's really transcending the ego. It is being committed to something greater than yourself. And it's making sure that you both commit to the behaviors, but also learn to embody the values that are going to make society better for future generations. And so the other part of your question was, how do you do that? I think through ancient traditions and then through American history, we were always passing down knowledge and wisdom and commitments in how we should live our lives. And we happen to live at a period in world history that is extremely rare. They were not free people in the way that Americans were free since 1776, ever through the course of world history. And then if you add up even the last 30, 40 years, we are more prosperous around the world than we have ever been. We are safer than we have ever been. We're more innovative. We're moving faster than we've ever been. And this is all like a massive gift, but it was a gift by people who were really committed to a set of ideas and tried to embody them in their daily lives, the way they interact with all of their spheres of influence, their families, their friends, their employees, their associations, things they were involved in. And people don't do this enough anymore, which means they're taking for granted the freedoms that we have today that were fought hard and studied hard. And as a result, I think society starts to break down. And you see that in our political discourse. You see that in our culture, in the way we consume information, the way we consume news, the way we want the quick fix. And so we talk about generational leadership because we need more leaders to really understand what makes free societies work, to really understand what makes a meaningful life work, and then once they have that understanding, to embody it in all different parts of their life, and then commit their resources to advancing those things. Those could be activated in all kinds of different ways. You could go address education. You could go address a tax policy. You could go help foster kids. You could go help any number of things, but you're doing it from a place of meaning, from a place of values, from a place of really knowing what you stand for and what makes free societies work. So that's what generational leadership means. Is I want my life to mean something, and I'm going to commit to contributing to real big ideas that move beyond me. And that's the type of leadership I'm going to exhibit. I'm not going to exhibit this sort of self-interested, narrow-minded, immediate gratification leadership. because while that's technically leadership, that's not the type of leadership that's going to take us forward.
That's a great explanation. These are really big concepts.
Sorry, I'll try to. I nerd out so much, as you guys know.
No, and you explain it really well. From this macro level, what does that look like? Can you give some examples?
Yeah, thank you.
You see that happen, with Alder and what you've seen in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I could talk about different cultural things and all that, where we see some of this breakdown in culture in general, ranging from dystopian views of the world in movies to just screen time for kids. But I think you see it in a few places. You see it in terms of hopelessness and loneliness is really on the rise. People don't find meaning in things, so which means you don't have a clear sense of where you exist in time and place. And you also see wide levels of distraction. There's just way too many options out there. You have so much information coming at you. And so if that's the environment you're operating in, what do you talk to your kids about if you're a parent? You're going to fight with them about screen time. You're going to have an app that really is just focused on the schedule between you and your wife and how you're taking this is me, I'm a male, so it could be your husband, your partner, your whatever. But in my case, I'm trying to think of how do I organize myself and my family? We have all these things, activities that kids are involved in. And so it's just divvying up attention. But it's not really stepping back and saying, well, what is this all for? We're not only preparing as adults in our children, we're preparing citizens. And in order to do that, we have to talk to our kids about what's going on in the world. We have to talk to our kids about our values. And those values could range from individual liberty, like big ideas that we learned about in high school and don't talk about anymore, but we should. It might just be values like pure manners, how you treat people, why, self-regulation, self-mastery, knowing your own emotions. We don't do this enough. We helicopter parent in a very broad, pervasive way, but it's all just to protect you from anything versus explore the world with you and your children. So that would be a in the home example of, I want to talk to my kids about what we stand for as a family. My wife and I want to encourage them to be curious about what's going on in the world, because someday they're going to be in a position to influence it. And so we'll talk about everything from what's happening in Afghanistan, so they have a sense of what it's like to live here versus somewhere else in the world, that there are good people, there are bad people. We want them to understand that they live in a very special country, that an idea like this didn't exist in history and it could be easily lost. And so we talk to them about these types of things. We talk to them about the types of people they want to be. And so that's an immediate personal one. You could also talk about helping entrepreneurs understand what free enterprise is. You're seeing a lot of talk today about reinventing capitalism and conscious capitalism. And I frankly think that's a load of crap, because all free enterprise is the voluntary exchange of goods and services. Now, I don't want to change that. I would like there to still be a voluntary exchange of goods and services, but I also recognize that free systems like free enterprise, free economic systems, or free political systems like democracy, they require a critical mass of the people participating in that system to be good, to be trustworthy, to be really smart. They know how to create value. They know how to take risks. They know how to build trust. They know how to build relationships. They're social animals. It requires that for those systems to work. But if you're an entrepreneur today in modern life, and you're told, oh, I'm going to have my liquidity event, I'm going to effing crush it. Or it's almost like being an entrepreneur is like being an actor in Hollywood. Everybody's sort of doing it. And because that means you're the quote man in the arena and you're doing it, as opposed to like, no, you're part of a system that has lifted billions of people out of poverty. And it's a radical idea in the course of human history. I wish more entrepreneurs would know about that, because you would honor the idea, the value system that is help that you're building your wealth on and within. So another part of it is understanding these big ideas, talking to your employees about it. You guys are incredible entrepreneurs. You've taken a heck of a lot of risk to create this. I think we've forgotten that adversity and risk are a part of creating anything of merit and value. And so how do we help more entrepreneurs have these conversations with their employees? And then I'll shut up with this one. And then at a broader political level, look at our politics. It's super short-sighted. We don't try to elect, we don't try to put people in office who are really thoughtful about policy, who are really thoughtful about the role of government, who are really thoughtful about solving big problems. We put people in office who are good, we think they're good on TV, or they're really good at pummeling the other guy, or they're really good at giving us access. Because government's so involved in so many people's lives that we're going to get access to something to help our business. And it's like, that's not good. And so we're not electing people to be like, well, you represent us. We're in a representative government. And I hope you're at your best and you're prioritizing the right things. We don't do that as much anymore. And so you see this breakdown. I gave you a family example, a business example, political example, where we're not seeing this leadership that's saying, I'm starting from a place of meaning. I'm asking myself what matters, and how am I going to go influence that in all the ways that I'm capable of doing. And you just see this collective breakdown kind of everywhere. And I think the breakdown just comes for a lot of reasons, but I think it comes down to take complacency. We're taking this very special time to be alive for granted. And so this is an appeal to be like, our kids need us.
I want to dig into that, going back to the family piece, because yesterday evening, my daughter, who's 18, leaving the nest, left this morning. I put her on an airplane, and we were sitting around with a bunch of her friends, and they were talking about how a lot of kids in her generation are worried and scared about having kids in this new world.
Woo.
And this is what they were talking about. And I was just listening to it and trying to, understand their perspective. But I think this is kind of what they were saying is this kind of a prevalent feeling is, hey, they're very jaded. The world's very scary. There's all this divisiveness. A lot of bad things are happening. I'm really scared. They have this feeling of fear that they're like, well, why do I want to bring this is not today, but in the future, a child into this place. So what, going back to the family and the influences of that, what do you say to them? How do you open that discussion and, start to talk about, hey, we are in this, amazing democracy that has a lot to offer.
Yeah, it's really sad when I hear that. I hear it a lot. I think one of it is just knowing the history and knowing the ideas, knowing how life works. And it is sad because I think young people are told they're just overwhelmed with information today. And a lot of that information is signaling to them that things are going to hell in a handbasket. But the other set of signals that they're getting is around shallowness, vanity and status and, likes on Instagram, et cetera. And that's really concerning across the board. But what I would say is more of an appeal to their sense of, because I think younger generations they do have a sense of dynamism. They just don't know where to direct it. And where it needs to be directed, I think, for the good of the country is today, actually, I think it was today, David McCullough, who's one of, I think, a national treasure historian, an American historian. He passed away today. One of my favorite speeches that he gave, he was asked if he could go to any room or moment of all the things that he has studied, what would that be? And he reflected on it, and he wanted to go when Ralph Waldo Emerson, I think, went to visit John Adams, the late president, or the president John Adams, who was very old. And he asked John Adams, what do you think the people need? And John Adams told David McCullough's capturing the story, and he said John Adams told him, and he wrote this down, Emerson wrote this down. He said, and a commitment, an ambition for excellence, an ambition to excel. And this isn't self-interested excellence, like I want to go achieve just wealth and status and vanity and fame. That's how I think people think of ambition today. Just a chance to be the best version of yourself, a chance to go create, to be a good person. I want to excel. And this country was built on the expectation that every generation will do that because it's the first free society. It's the longest running at this point under the same system. And so I think I would tell the young people that if you believe that this is not a special place, it will no longer be special. If you believe that you cannot contribute to it, you will not contribute to it. Living at this place in time, you must believe in the possibilities. And there's more than enough evidence to tell you that every problem that we need to solve, we have in our capacity to solve today. But it takes your conviction, it takes your knowledge, it takes your commitment to really see that through. So go have a lot of kids, love your family, create windows of opportunity, be a force for love, be a force for freedom, be a force for good, because previous generations broke the backs of threats and challenges and evils that we have not even close to have seen today. And they did it through a fierce commitment of love and liberty and togetherness. And if we can embody that in our own way, applied to our new threats, then we're going to create a heck of an amazing life. Otherwise, you're just going to be lost in the forest. It's like, who wants to live a life thinking everything sucks? No one. So, and it doesn't suck. It's actually quite awesome. So we can't let this pessimism take hold. And then I might, since it's me, I'd probably go off on a rant about all kinds of examples in American history about how they saw it differently, and thank God they did. And so, our kids as kids, ask them, what did you do? And you're either going to tell them, I believed in a better world and I really studied what that meant and I committed myself to it. Or you're going to tell them, you know what, I felt like things kind of sucked, so I missed out. It's just, you could make it a really personal choice because that's all it is. It's a very intimate personal choice. Do you want to quit and be glass half full? Or do you want to create abundance or glass half empty, or create abundance and go glass half full? Let's go.
Is that Michael, is that why you take people to Cuba and Poland and other places in the world so you can reflect back on how great this country is?
That is exactly why. Thank you, Gabe. We do, because we want to see that the way we live is just beamed into our regular lives, and we take that completely for granted. And what this country has sacrificed on its own soil and beyond to carry the call of freedom is extraordinary. I'll give you two quick examples. I live on a Civil War battlefield in Tennessee, and this battle, the Battle of Franklin, had no strategic importance whatsoever. It was a random clash between two armies on their way to Nashville. And it was one of the bloodiest 4 hours in American history. A full stop, over 10,000 casualties, nasty. And that is one example of a horrific, horrific war. And this country fought that war to prove to the world that men and women should not be enslaved, that people are actually free. And Abraham Lincoln knew that the rest of the world at the time, still largely kings and queens, wanted us to fail, because if we failed, that means the experiment of free people would fail. And so he knew that it wasn't just, I have to preserve the Union. He had to preserve the idea of free people around the world. We don't study that anymore. We don't talk about that anymore. It's like this long lost thing. That's a big problem. And so of course we're going to take it for granted. And then one other quick one, that's American soil, but then around the world. I remember we did a trip to China, and our tour guide, as much as I pay attention to this, I did two bonehead things. I'm just going to blame it on the jet lag. But this young woman who was helping us, she's super awesome. I asked her, she was talking about my family, and I have a bunch of siblings, and my wife and I have 4 kids. And then I asked her, oh, do you have siblings? And she's like, no, because of the one child policy. So if her mom, and she got really awkward. So that meant that if her mom had wanted to have a child, the state would have forced her to have an abortion. And that's like, you put that into perspective, it certainly should calibrate the type of debate that we have today on that issue. Maybe we should try to respect different sides and really work things through, because these are not easy things. And it could be a hell of a lot worse. Like a big ass state could come in and force you to do things. I also asked her, Xi Jinping was coming into power at the time we were there. And I go, oh, what do you think about that? Do you like him? She goes, I don't. It's not like that in America. Like, we're not like America. It doesn't matter. Like, it was, oh, I'm sorry. And I could give you example after example like that in Russia, in the Emirates, in Qatar, all over the world, that even free societies like, France, England, less so England, but Brazil, where they find the fact that we Americans go look around the world and in our own home and think, let's go solve things. We're enterprising people. We care a lot about liberty. That makes us really weird compared to the billions of people who lived in previous times. And that's a unique thing. And we have to have that perspective. And sometimes you got to take people around the world for them to really see it and internalize it. Because everybody, again, is paying attention to what's right in front of them. They're not paying attention to what came before, what's happening beyond, what's happening within, where can I lead things? We're just not. And so we have to learn, just keep getting people to zoom back out. And so anything we could do to create experiences, exposure, community, it's all a form of seduction on the road to a purposeful life.
Going back to your ambition for excellence kind of concept, how did you become introduced to GenX, and how did you make the decision, GenX preceding Alder, and how did you make the decision that you wanted to commit yourself into building this to be an organization of excellence?
Great. So for me, I've always been, sort of happy warrior, to the point about, I've shared this story before, but I was traveling in Russia as a kid with Soviet Union. And I was walking around Red Square, and I was wearing the warm-ups, the Russian warm-ups, and a military officer asked me if I'm an American. And I asked, like, how did he know I'm dressed up as a Russian? And he said the translator told me that, or interpreter told me that he could tell I'm an American because I walk like I'm free. And at a very young age, I was like, wow, that's profound. And I didn't really know what it meant, literally, but I knew that it meant that me being an American is something special. And it's something that I could easily take for granted, because it even goes so far as to being in the pep of my step. And so I started thinking about freedom, about how ideas have consequences, how values have consequences. How do they make their way into people's lives? And I really wanted to commit myself to that. So I went and I started doing all kinds of work in social entrepreneurship. I did policy work, I did nonprofit work, I was trying to organize people. I really wanted to understand what made this place special, what makes life worth living. And so I was doing a lot of things like that. And then I had a political experience, or an experience in politics, I should say, that was pretty nasty. It was ruthless politics, very transactional. And I would say almost disenchanted. But then around this time, I started thinking, you know what, I can't be a go-getter and go make a difference. I need to go figure out how to make money. Now, I made my own mistake at the time of like thinking those are mutually exclusive things. But so I started doing that, and then I met Paul Makarishan, the founder of GenX, and he and his family survived the Iranian Revolution. And so they saw what it's like for a society to fully, not just collapse, but get taken over by, mullahs and horrible people. And he became very enamored with the American idea. And he started talking to a lot of his buddies who are also, he is a very accomplished real estate entrepreneur. And he starts talking to a lot of his buddies, and they're like, dude, I'll do that stuff when I retire. I'm building a business, I'm raising a family, I'm kind of busy. And he was like, no, we're not going to care as much at that point. We're not going to be as informed as much at that point. Everything's going to get worse along the way. And so how do I create a way to get people to have a sustained engagement in the core wisdom that exists in this country, but also mobilizing the best and the brightest to make a big difference? And so I met him around this time. So here you have me being kind of disenchanted with difference making, so to speak. And then I meet this guy who has considerable means, but a bigger heart and wanting to rally others. And so I committed back then, that was about almost 18 years ago, to go be a force. And it really became like, how do we go solve big problems? And one of those big problems is, how do we get talented people again to care about what makes this place special, what makes a life well lived, and be in community together and go solve big problems together and have a good time together. And along the way, we've been able to do a lot. Our members have started charter schools. We've helped elect amazing people. We've changed the way members talk within their own families about what matters in life and in the country with employees. We've done a lot of work in counter-extremism, counterterrorism. We have a bunch of members who are going to Ukraine at the end of the month to do a humanitarian mission. And so once you start exposing people to this, it'll start running its course. It's just, in normal American life, people think that they don't have the time for it. And so they don't make the time for it. So back then it was, and it still is, of like, our kids need leadership now. So let's figure out how to get the best and the brightest to have a hell of a great time, learn awesome ideas, make them smarter, more innovative, better connected, but also part of something bigger than themselves.
You know, when he talked about wearing the Russian suit and peppiness, that being identifiable as an American, I was just telling the story about the first time we met you. I'll condense it for this, but we sit down up at the Contemporary Art Museum in Orange County, and somebody introduced you, and you come walking in. I remember looking back, and I see this like business version of Conor McGregor just swagging down the aisle, you know, and I'm like, here comes this guy. You're in a big room with a ton of affluent people. And what I wanted to ask about that was, you are a social entrepreneur. You're setting forward new ideas and things of the nature that can create doubt as you're trying to, you know, get adoption along what you're doing. And we've seen you in settings that are where you're vulnerable, you let your guard down, you admit certain things, but how much do you have to deal with that imposter syndrome and doubt while being a big, strong personality and setting forward like a vision that you're working to bring to fruition?
Oh man, every day, multiple times a day, a lot. I think all the stuff that everybody needs is to remind themselves of who they are, what they're capable of, what they're called to do. And you find your path for it. So for me, a lot. I'm very grateful over the last, and it's not lost on me that over the last 18 years, I've been able to interact with some of the most powerful people who are still alive in world history, and even entrepreneurs and business people, and just have a really unbelievable network, which has been great. But these are not just accomplished people. These are people who really want to make a difference. They want to live a good life. And so that's fantastic. And so I think I try to approach it with a level of humility and gratitude to be in service of that. And so when I have these moments of like, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I'm capable of that. I can't figure XYZ out. I just have to find that place in me that's really committed to making a difference and really committed to growing, making a difference beyond me, but also making a difference within me. And I think we lose sight, there really is an alignment between those two things. You can't serve others if you don't know how to take care of yourself. And so I try to do that. I also, I think though, this is also a very human struggle, like all human beings across time. You know, I like to read a lot of ancient texts and spiritual texts. And right now I'm working, our friend Jared sent me the I Ching, and I'm reading the I Ching, and in the I Ching, the thing that resonates a lot with me lately is around perseverance. And just keep going for the breakthrough, because you do have to persevere. I also recently was reading the Bible, and you know, as Jesus says, what is it? Gird up your loins and light your lamps. And it's like, I love the, you know, the same sort of thing, which is like, get ready, persevere, and light the way. Like, that's what human beings are meant to do all the time. And when we lose sight of that because we're distracted and busy, that's when I think things start to really collapse on themselves. And so I try to remember that this is a human experience across all time and space. I'm not unique in this way. I just am going to try to contribute in my unique way at this point in time and see it through. But it does. I think it's not so much that people are impressive and powerful. That's not what intimidates me. What intimidates me, I don't even know if intimidate's the right word, but bums me out, or has high risk of bums me out, is we live at a period of time when GenX was starting, apathy was a big problem. This was pre-financial collapse. It was in Orange County. It was like the roaring 20s. I mean, people were throwing money all over the place. And the problem then was apathy. I'll do that later. I got a few more million to make. Now it's pessimism. I mean, the biggest headwind when I start feeling like I'm crazy, it's when I'm talking to people that are so pessimistic, and it's like the why try. That's when I feel like a little bit like an imposter, because I feel like, oh my God, are people just going to write me off because they think I'm nuts? It's like, but I can't let that thinking kick in. Then I'm not going to be I'm not going to be myself.
Can you give us some examples of, people or leaders or influencers that you've met that have kind of brought you up and inspired you and got, that invigorates you?
Well, I talked about our chairman. I think that's a big one. I really have in sort of like national figures. I really like, like Condoleezza Rice and Margaret Thatcher, people coming to mind, like they believed in a personal ethos and a world ethos, and they found an alignment between those things and just rocked through it. But also you guys, you two. I mean, I didn't even get to know you when you were coming into our community, but the way you talk to your families, the way you engage your employees, the way you're curious about what's going on in the world, and you really probe for clarity and you probe for perspective, and you have a good time doing it. It's you guys and people like you that make me think like that is exactly why I am committed to this, because we need more Gabe and Jamie's out there. And in order to get more of you guys out there, we got to be a great resource to help this be an awesome experience that helps you grow and helps you go do big and awesome things in the world. So I'm fortunate that
thanks for staying on script there, Michael.
Yeah. I know you guys, yeah, $20 for that one. But no,
bottles in the mail.
You're very fun, purposeful people. I think that when the founding fathers created this country, I think they really had in mind people like you. And so I want to surround myself with those types of people. And so I am fortunate that a lot of them are here, and we are a community that harnesses passions. And so sometimes you get the shadow sides of those passions. And sometimes the shadow sides is pessimism. Sometimes it's like more volatile than that, like, disagreement, people that like shuts down, especially today. But I still think being a place that elevates discourse, that elevates purpose, that elevates the specialness that this country is, it creates a flywheel of impact in ways that we can never completely count.
When we went through our planning session for 2022, I remember a question catching me off guard, which was something to the nature of, hey, would you ever, want to run for mayor of San Diego, or something to that extent? And, it tied closely to Alder's theme of, the next generation of leaders being developed. Is that where we're headed? Is Alder going to try to help people foster where they're at into those roles, or what does the future of Alder look like if that's not it?
This could be an announcement right now from Jamie.
Yeah, no. This up. Maybe this is fantastic.
I fell out of my chair and said, "Oh, no, wrong guy."
Think of making a difference as a spectrum, not really a continuum, but a spectrum. And in a free country, there's literally an infinite amount of ways that you could do good in the world, and it's where you're needed to do good in the world. My wife and I we've adopted pets. We've adopted a baby boy. We've had our own children. We try to get involved in all kinds of different causes. And then, of course, my work is tied to that. There's all kinds of ways. And I think that we need to think more about the formation of kind of like citizen leadership, which means you have the proper mindset of purpose and heart and commitment to something beyond you. You have the proper disposition to learn, to grow, to surround yourself with others that help you grow. And then you have the proper kind of commitment to allocate resources, time, attention, and money to go act on these values in different domains. And so the different domains become this. There's a spectrum, I think, of embodying this type of journey, but there's also a spectrum of all the different ways this journey could go. So you have very micro things like I'm really kind of trying to care more. I'm trying to pay attention more. I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to change the way I talk about things so I could be more enlightening and persuasive and uplifting. You have the things where you're looking around you, like my community. You might want to run for mayor. You might want to get involved in a local nonprofit. I know you guys do, coaching your kids' teams and things like that. You just want to be involved. All those things are important. Or you might want to do systemically impactful things. Maybe you want to help in Ukraine. Maybe you want to change the education system. Maybe you want to do any number of these things. Maybe it's climate change, any number of these issues. I think people get overwhelmed by the bigness of it all, but they don't need to. Just in one of those, the individual, the communal, or the big macro societal levels, just pick something within each one of them and pay a bit of attention to it along the way, and you'll see where it takes you. And so, yes, is the answer to your question. I do expect our members to go run for office, to either serve in government, either being appointed, or to run for office. I see a lot of that, but I also see our members starting companies that are very purposeful, starting companies together that are creating a lot of opportunity, talking to their employees differently, talking to their families differently, being involved in a whole range of different types of causes. And you want to see this sort of network effect play out civically. I think that's really important. We happen to live at a time where we're looking for things that scale, that you can measure, pick one thing. And I don't think free societies are like that. Communist societies are like that. We're not that. So we just want to share the same set of values, but we want to activate on those values in different ways. So part of my answer to your question, Jamie, and I hope this is not a dodge, part of my answer is yes, we will see that. We've already seen that. A number of our members have served in government at very high levels and at very local levels. But we also want to see people just activating in a whole different range of parts of their lives. I'll give you one example. I think of Alder as a bit of a modern Freemasons, just with women and without, so more diverse and without the altars. And you have a bit of that, this sort of sense of like servant leadership that these old societies would bring. It was just people from different walks of life who came together and said, we're going to believe in high ideals, and we're going to help each other grow along the way to realizing those high ideals. But the way that activated and the way that benefited their lives happened in a ton of different ways. Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Paul Revere, etc., all Freemasons. I don't know if they would have had the character formation to lead our country if they had not also been in these communities. And then in the way that they all did it in different ways. And it also benefited them in different ways. We know the story of Paul Revere. There were a number of people who went and warned that the British were coming, but Paul Revere became one of the most famous, or the most famous. Why? Because he had a network. Why did he have a network? And people talked about him because he was part of the Freemasons. And so we need more people to kind of be on that, that journey of purpose, be open to possibilities of where it could lead them without being overly prescriptive. And you will start to see the water that will go nourish what needs to be nourished if you give them the room to do that. And so that's what we're trying to do, which doesn't give me a nifty sales pitch. Like, if you join us, you're going to go do X. And it's like, look, if you put in the work, you'll be in a position to run for office. You'll be in a position to be on a nonprofit board. But most of all, you're going to be in a position to be prouder of who you are. And you're going to set an example for your kids and your family and your employees, because you are going to start to be on a journey of a more meaningful life. And you're going to realize that you're a national treasure, but because you're aware and you're committed. I'm not going to tell you where the hell that should go. You got to put in the work to figure out where that's going to be.
A lot of the, you mentioned that this challenge of pessimism, and we're always talking about how it feels like we're more divided than ever before. One, do you believe that's true, that we're more divided than we were ever before from a political perspective?
No.
And two is, how do you address that, that pessimism, to kind of start to change the hearts and minds of people and saying, hey, get engaged, lean in.
Yeah.
You're going to get more from that from just being pessimistic.
You could enter this in any form of discipline. So if you took, like, say, psychology, positive psychology, William James had this saying, your belief in something will create the fact. And so you really got to think about what you're paying attention to. We also know from the social science that people are not interacting with one another as much anymore. And so that causes people to go more inward, and you don't sustain a commitment to what's beyond you and what makes you better. And so there's these big trends in modern life that are really working against creating a free and just society. But I think let me go to your question on division, because it might answer a bit. We're not the most divided we've ever been. I talked about the Civil War earlier. That was pretty damn divided. We also have been divided and have worked through horribly difficult issues. The 60s and everything from Jim Crow to the rampant bombings. We've worked through oppressive government with prohibition. We've worked through McCarthyism. That was some pretty severe cancel culture. We worked through the dystopia of the Vietnam War. We defeated Axis powers and Hitler. I mean, like, we beat the British Empire at our founding. Like, this is serious shit. And we have figured it out. And we also fought really hard with each other along the way. Like, there was not an American, zeitgeist along the way at all. We know that people now impose their morals onto past generations, but most of the time you'd be wrong about the side you would have chosen. And so I don't think that we have a division problem. I think we have a depth problem. The ability to nurture depth, the ability to sustain a commitment to depth, the willing to value depth. And so we don't have a reservoir of the character traits that help us weather these storms, like resilience, like patience, like e pluribus unum. We also don't have a depth of knowledge. Like, our kids they think that America was bad. And it's like, oh my God, just look at all of world history. That's bad, And so you don't, like, that's really, really bad. The fact that Americans fight at this level, the most diverse, most powerful, prosperous country in the world, is fighting about a standard that's way beyond us, that no civilization has ever chose to even try to realize, but we have. That's bad. So there's a knowledge. And then the last problem is there's a deficit of institutions that shape people, ranging from families to businesses to local organizations to large organizations that bring people together and help pull them in to be the best of themselves. So when you have this deficit of knowledge, this deficit of character, and this deficit of institutions that pull it out of people, that's an ingredient for divisive forces that are just a common feature of all of human life will freaking railroad you. And so Alder is in many ways an antidote to those three threats, because we appeal to people to go deeper, build the character traits that are going to lead us through, know what matters, and work your way through being shaped so you could be an impactful citizen. The country absolutely needs it. And by the way, your legacy needs it, because at some point in your life, you're going to be like, oh shit, I made a bunch of money, but I suck. And we don't want that. No one wants that.
He's talking to you.
Sure.
He's talking to you. Does TEDx have a division that speaks to the youth of America? Because I feel like he should go give a talk on a TEDx that's intended to speak to the next generation.
Well, you might have.
You do, and I'm actively I mean, I'm trying to learn how to do this better because I think it's important to get these messages out. But like when I go and I talk about the founding fathers or free enterprise or civics, people are like, nerd alert, nerd alert. But these are amazing stories. And so I wish that more people would talk about them and would know them and be excited about them. So I try to help other organizations that are doing that sort of thing. But and I think part of that is our own organization is helping our members be really informed and effective communicators about what matters in life, and get out there and do it. Because our members are extremely influential. You guys are hugely influential citizens. You know, the top quote 1% of do-gooders with means is you, and we have a lot of those in our community. So I do feel much more hope about it, but we do also have a big problem because we as a society don't value that like we should.
Well, I mean, I'm biased, but I personally feel, we have the, best democracy in the world. As an American, what is your view of what's, this American experiment? What is the secret ingredient that we have? Is there one?
I think the secret ingredient, it's both our greatest strength, but our biggest challenge. And that is, it's the we the people. It's the first system in the world that has said, I'm going to expect the best from the people. Because the people have individual dignity and individual liberty that is given at birth. And they need to lead the way. I think that is what makes, and so then that manifests in all kinds of different ways. People come together, they solve problems. We're a prosperous economy because we innovate, we take risks. That's because we set the expectation, hey, go figure this stuff out. In our historically, our governmental system, our constitutional system is it's the longest running same government in history. And it's because it expects the people to rise to the occasion. You cannot learn responsibility without being given responsibility. And so I think the American people have learned in some form or another, we're losing these lessons, but in some form or another, we've learned that, look, if you want a good life, it's on you. If you want a good political system, it's on us. And so I think that's the most powerful thing, is this commitment to individual liberty, the commitment to individual dignity, and then the expectation to go see that through for others voluntarily. That to me is the most novel thing that the American values have introduced here and around the world. And we're now, you pull millennials today, and like free enterprise and democracy are rapidly declining. And it's like, man, go meet the people who live in Normandy.
Yeah.
You go anywhere in the world and meet these people, and you're like, oh, I realize I've taken that for granted.
Well, how big of a problem is media? Because you go back to like the concern that Gabe spoke about, with his daughter Abby, and not just millennials, but anyone I'm around who's consuming, and it doesn't matter which side of the political news you're taking information from. One of the best things that I like about Alder is, something important happens in Iran or China or Russia or somewhere. I feel like the next day you've got us speaking to a general or a ex-secretary of state or somebody who's really bringing us unfiltered news direct from the source. And we consume it in a way that very few people have the opportunity to do. And it changes my perspective of what's going on with the issue, because when I turn on the TV and I toggle between either news station that might represent the different political sides, neither of them match the information that we get in that unfiltered state. And so how big of a problem is that? And how do we solve that?
Well, we have to solve it by reclaiming it in our daily lives first. So you guys are part of the solution in that way. I think this problem started with the advent of modern communications in some ways. But there was a book in the 80s or 90s, I think it was called Entertaining Ourselves to Death. And he talks about how he sort of predicted that news is going to become entertainment. And so that's what it is. So it's part of So when you're watching the news, they got the person who makes the best, does not make the best argument. They find the person who makes the pithiest statement and who's entertaining. And so we just got to know that. And then we also, by the way, now have enemies, Iran, Russia, China, who exploit that. Like they exploit our stupidity, our ignorance. They exploit it completely by pushing more and more of that in our face. But I think there's something there that is, so first the solution I think is just your listeners. I know that are pretty influential people in business. And I think that they hopefully will take more of an interest in like what's going on beyond the news. Or maybe it's not even the news. Like don't read the news, just understand like what makes life worth living and what makes this place special. So in that case, it's definitely not news. I think you also have, there probably, you also kind of got a Trojan horse or co-opt this sense of entertainment. I notice when I'm trying to talk about the founding fathers as an example or American history, if I tell the story and I don't name names or I don't name periods of time, it's more interesting. And so if I said, yeah, so you got this guy, he's really tall, you kind of have jacked up teeth, but he has huge balls and he's willing to go like really care for a lot of other people, and people follow him because he has a deep sets of conviction about the time and place he lives. You have this other guy who's like a total innovator, total entrepreneur. He loves to chase tail, always flirting with chicks, but he's kind of a deep thinker and he's like an entrepreneur. He's kind of like you. And there's this other guy who's kind of stodgy, very rigid, just wants to live a good life, pretty religious, but firm. And these other two guys are always telling him to calm down. But these three amigos, they help so many people. If I said that, you're like, oh, whatever. And then I tell a random story about what they did or some risky scenario that they were all in. And then I'm like, oh, by the way, that was George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. It's like, oh, okay.
Which
and so
it just the big balls.
It's finding a way. George Washington is the one. Although Benjamin Franklin probably feels like he's a pretty baller too. But I think it's just we have to find ways. First, we have to know what we care about. And I think that we don't know what we care about today. We have forgotten. So we have to know what we care about. And then we have to have fun and compelling ways to share that with others. And then we have to have fun and willing ways of be involved and be needed. And we don't do that enough. But we are appealing to the generational leaders who want to do that. They want this to be part of their life. They want to live a legacy. And that's what Alder is here to do, is to help our members have the community.
Gabe just wants to be affiliated with the big balls.
Can
you make that happen, Michael?
I assume that you guys are already there. Massive swagger with you guys.
Well, I think we've proven to ourselves, at least, that we could talk for hours and hours on end. But for the sake of moving forward here, we're going to move you into rapid fire questions.
Okay, WWE has asked you to be a guest wrestler. Which one would you be, and what would be your signature move?
Ric Flair. And just because he's so flamboyant and hilarious, it's like, if you're going to do that, you might as well just lose your mind and get after it.
You'd have to dye your hair to be that one.
Yeah, that is a tough one though, because I was like an actual wrestler. And so it's a little bit of a trigger, but I don't know. I'd probably jump off the ropes, put on a show.
I feel like Ric Flair might be pissed when he listens to this. All right. So I know you play the guitar, but if you had to pick an instrument that you don't already know how to play, what would it be?
Piano.
Ooh, good one.
Who has had the most impact on your career?
On my career. Paul, our chairman. I could name, you're making me go. There have been a lot. I'm so grateful for it, but you're asking me to do rapid fire in one. So our chairman.
All right. Favorite author and book written.
You know what? I won't say this is, I don't have a favorite. I think I would just say, especially in honor of David McCullough, I would say David McCullough and 1776.
Perfect.
What's your biggest pet peeve when it comes to business?
A lack of personal responsibility, like pettiness, bickering. It's not
Yeah.
personal. We're just trying to figure problems out and make a difference. Why do we need to bicker? That's that's
love
not
that.
business as an institution, that I would probably say, oh, short-term thinking. And I don't like the performative nature of business executives today taking a position on every issue you can imagine that they don't even understand. But within business and running a business, it's when people put the personal above the mission.
All right, Gabe and I are flying to Tennessee to come have dinner with you at your house. What are you serving? And in Jeffersonian style, what is the topic of conversation going to be for the evening?
We'd probably make we make really good carne asada, and we make really good guacamole. And so I'd probably go there. That would be our go-to, or just grill some steaks. I'd make some margaritas. And
How do you make that Nashville style?
Here you have a half Hispanic guy. I'm just making it here in Nashville. So it's
okay, there you go.
Yeah. Or we'll just go pick you up some hot chicken. And then topic, I think I would run something on what's your earliest memory with a sense of patriotism?
Good one. I have to think about that myself.
And that would start to turn into, am I honoring that? How does that translate to other parts of my life, et cetera, et cetera?
All right. Well, show's called Discover the Difference. So we always wrap up with 2 questions around that topic. Gabe, you want to fire first?
Sure. This is the reflection part. When you're reflecting back on your journey, what would you say to the younger version of Michael?
Be bolder and build for the long term.
All right. So on the differentiator, we have huge disdain for doing things the way they've always been done, or where, as my kids will say, I call them salmon, when just blocks of people are mindlessly following something in one direction. What's the secret sauce in you and in Alder that makes it special and different?
I think it's a commitment to really big ideas felt in really intimate, personal ways. And by that, I mean like fun, interesting, and with amazing people. I think that's really it. I mean, we've been able to deal with some of the most powerful companies, NGOs, governments in the world on some of the most difficult, literally life and death issues. And the only way that you can thrive and not lose yourself in doing that, either lose yourself by way of like ego and vanity and status, or lose yourself by like being depressed about the horrors in the world, is if you could have a strong alignment about, I want to do big things, but I want to enjoy myself doing it with others. And so it's that sense of community, that sense of wonder, and that sense of big belief. And the combination of those things, I think, makes us very different than anything else out there.
Awesome.
I mean, I wholeheartedly feel that, attracted to that. And I think we experience it in almost everything we do with Alder.
Yeah. So Michael, for people that are listening that want to learn more about Alder, what should they do?
Well, they could email me at michael@alder.co, or you could go online at alder.co and fill out the information on there, or go on Instagram at @wearealder _wearealder. Any number of those things, or reach out to you guys, because y'all are some of the best ambassadors who we have.
All right, perfect.
Awesome. Well,
Is
thanks so much.
that 2 bottles of wine we have to send them?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah, no, just the other way around, guys.
All right, brother. Well, hey, man, we appreciate your time and coming on, and we look forward to seeing you again in person at the next Alder event.
Awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much.